I thought I was going crazy. That's the only way I can describe standing in my childhood bedroom at 2 in the morning, still in my rehearsal dinner dress, staring at a text message that would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust. Let me know in the comments where you're watching this from, because no matter what corner of the world you're in, I guarantee you've never heard a story quite like this one. And if you have ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, if you've ever discovered that the people you trusted most were capable of unimaginable betrayal, then please hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about finding your voice when everyone else tries to silence it. The text was from Marcus, my fiancé of 3 years. The man I was supposed to marry in 14 hours. The message was simple: can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. But it wasn't the message that made my blood run cold. It was what I heard through the thin walls of my mother's house as I stood there, phone trembling in my hands. Voices. His voice. Her voice. My mother's voice. I grew up in this house on Maple Street in Charlottesville, Virginia. A modest 2-story colonial with creaky floorboards and walls so thin you could hear a whisper from 3 rooms away. As a teenager, I'd hated how every phone call, every late-night conversation could be overheard. Now, at 29, I was grateful for those thin walls, because they were about to reveal a truth I never could have imagined. Patricia, we can't keep doing this, I heard Marcus say, his voice muffled but unmistakable. Patricia. My mother's name. My legs gave out, and I sank onto my old twin bed, the same bed where I'd dreamed about my wedding day since I was 7 years old. The same bed where I'd planned every detail of tomorrow's ceremony with my mother sitting right beside me, helping me choose flowers, discussing the menu, acting like the loving, supportive mother I'd always believed her to be. Just one more night, came her response, breathy and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. After tomorrow, she'll be your wife, and this will all be different. The room started spinning. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making any sound, because some primal part of my brain understood that I needed to hear everything. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. I should have called off the engagement months ago, Marcus continued, and I could hear movement, footsteps pacing across the hardwood floor of what I now realized was my mother's bedroom, directly below mine. This whole thing with you. Patricia, what we're doing is what? She interrupted, and her voice had that edge it always got when she felt cornered. The same tone she'd used during my parents' divorce when I was 16. The same tone she'd used when she explained why she'd started dating my high school boyfriend's father just 6 months after my graduation. Is honest. Is the first real thing either of us has felt in years. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run downstairs and burst through that door and confront them both right there. But something held me frozen in place. Maybe shock, maybe the desperate hope that I was misunderstanding everything, or maybe just the lifetime of training that had taught me to be quiet, to be good, to never make waves. Instead, I listened as the 2 people I trusted most in the world dismantled my entire life in hushed tones below my feet. She's going to find out eventually, Marcus said, and I could hear the resignation in his voice. Rachel's not stupid. She notices things. Rachel. That was me, reduced to a problem to be managed. She won't find out if we're careful, my mother replied, and the casual way she said it, like she'd already thought this through, like she'd been planning this, made my chest tighten with rage. After the wedding, after you're married, we'll figure out how to handle this. But I can't give you up, Marcus. Not now, not when I've finally found. Found what? His voice was getting louder, more frustrated. Found a way to compete with your own daughter? Found a way to take something else that doesn't belong to you? There was silence for a moment, and in that silence, I heard 29 years of my relationship with my mother play back in my mind like a broken record. Every boyfriend she'd flirted with. Every achievement she'd somehow made about herself. Every time she'd entered a room and needed to be the center of attention, even at my college graduation, even at my birthday parties, even at my engagement party just 6 months ago. That's not what this is, she finally said, but her voice was smaller now, defensive. This is about us. About what we have together. What we have together is destroying an innocent person, Marcus shot back. Rachel deserves better than this. She deserves better than both of us. I almost laughed at the irony. Here was my cheating fiancé, defending my honor to my cheating mother on the night before our wedding. The situation was so twisted, so impossibly cruel, that my brain kept trying to reject it as reality. But it was real. The text message on my phone was real. Their voices were real. And in about 12 hours, I was supposed to walk down the aisle of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in the wedding dress that was hanging in my closet, toward the man who was currently in my mother's bed, talking about how I deserved better while he actively participated in giving me worse. I heard footsteps again, movement, and then my mother's voice, soft and pleading, "Stay tonight. Just tonight. Tomorrow changes everything, but tonight you're still mine." The silence that followed was answer enough. I sat there for another hour, listening to the sounds that no daughter should ever have to hear, understanding with crystal clarity that my wedding day, the day I'd been planning since childhood, was going to be anything but what I'd imagined. But here's what neither of them knew as they betrayed me in the room below. I'd inherited more from my mother than just her green eyes and her stubborn chin. I'd also inherited her talent for planning, her ability to think 3 steps ahead, and her gift for understanding exactly how to make people pay for underestimating her. As I finally crept back under my childhood covers, still wearing my rehearsal dinner dress, still clutching that damning text message, I wasn't just a heartbroken bride-to-be anymore. I was a woman with a plan. And tomorrow, in front of God and 200 wedding guests, I was going to make sure that both Marcus and my mother got exactly what they deserved. The last thing I heard before I finally fell into a restless sleep was my mother's bedroom door opening and closing, and Marcus's footsteps on the stairs as he tried to sneak out of the house at 4 in the morning. Too bad for him that I was already awake, already planning, already 3 steps ahead of the game they thought they were playing. Tomorrow was going to be a wedding day no one would ever forget. I woke up to the sound of my mother humming. She was actually humming as she made coffee downstairs, the same cheerful tune she'd hummed every morning of my childhood, as if she hadn't spent the night betraying her own daughter with a man who was supposed to pledge his eternal love to me in 8 hours. The audacity was breathtaking. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling I'd stared at through countless teenage heartbreaks, except this time the pain was different. This wasn't puppy love gone wrong or college romance drama. This was the deliberate, calculated destruction of my future by the 2 people who were supposed to protect it. My phone showed 6 missed calls from my maid of honor, Jessica, and 17 text messages from various wedding party members asking about final details. Everyone was excited. Everyone was ready to celebrate my big day. Everyone except the bride, who was currently plotting the most spectacular wedding disaster in Virginia history. "Rachel, honey, are you awake?" My mother called up the stairs, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I made your favorite pancakes." The same pancakes she'd made every birthday morning since I was 5. The same pancakes she'd taught me to make when I was 12, standing behind me at the stove, her hands over mine as she showed me how to flip them just right. The same pancakes she'd made the morning after my father moved out, trying to convince me that everything was going to be okay. I wanted to throw up. Instead, I forced myself to sit up, to put my feet on the floor, to act like the dutiful daughter I'd been trained to be my entire life. Because if I was going to pull off what I had planned, I needed her to suspect absolutely nothing. "Coming, Mom," I called back, injecting just the right amount of nervous bride excitement into my voice. I caught sight of myself in my old vanity mirror as I stood up, the same mirror where I'd practiced wedding vows as a little girl, where I'd imagined my perfect wedding day countless times. My hair was a disaster, my makeup was smeared from crying, and I was still wearing my rehearsal dinner dress. But my eyes looked different. Harder. More focused. Good. I was going to need that focus. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother was standing at the stove with her back to me, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for Mother's Day last year. Her graying blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and she'd already done her makeup. She looked beautiful, radiant even, in a way that made my stomach turn. "There's my beautiful bride," she said, turning around with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How did you sleep, sweetheart?" I studied her face, looking for any sign of guilt, any crack in the performance. Nothing. She was good at this, better than I'd ever realized. How many other lies had she told me over the years? How many other betrayals had she hidden behind that maternal smile? I slept great, I lied smoothly, accepting the plate of pancakes she handed me. I'm so excited I could barely close my eyes. She laughed, a sound that used to comfort me and now made my skin crawl. I remember feeling the same way before my wedding. The anticipation is almost overwhelming, isn't it? Her wedding. To my father. The marriage she'd spent 16 years systematically destroying with her need for attention, her affairs, her inability to let anyone else be the center of attention for even a moment. The marriage that ended when she slept with my high school boyfriend's father, because apparently seducing the men in my life was her specialty. Mom, I said carefully, cutting into my pancakes, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Anything. Do you think Marcus and I are right for each other? She didn't even flinch. Didn't hesitate. Just sat down across from me at the same kitchen table where she'd helped me with homework for 12 years and looked me straight in the eye. I think Marcus is one of the good ones, she said. He loves you, Rachel. Anyone can see that. The lie came so easily, so naturally, that I almost admired her skill. Here she was, less than 4 hours after I'd heard her begging him to stay in her bed, telling me how much he loved me. You really think so? I pressed, watching her face carefully. Absolutely, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. He makes you happy, and that's all I've ever wanted for you. A man who makes you happy. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip this table over and demand to know how she could sit there and lie to my face with such perfect composure. Instead, I squeezed her hand back and smiled. Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me. She beamed, probably thinking she'd successfully navigated a potential minefield. She had no idea that every word out of her mouth was just giving me more ammunition for what was coming. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. OMG, Rachel, where are you? Hair and makeup starts in an hour and you're not here yet. I should probably head to the church soon, I said, standing up and barely touching my pancakes. My appetite had vanished somewhere around the time I discovered my entire life was a lie. I'll meet you there in a bit, my mother said. I just need to finish getting ready. Finish getting ready. Right. She needed to transform herself into the perfect mother of the bride, the woman who would walk me down the aisle since my father couldn't be there. The woman who would smile proudly as she handed me over to the man she'd been sleeping with. Mom, I said from the kitchen doorway, turning back to look at her one more time. Yes, sweetheart. I love you. Her face softened, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion flicker across her features. I love you too, Rachel. More than you'll ever know. The sad thing was, I actually believed that last part. In her own twisted way, she probably did love me. She just loved herself more. As I drove to the church through the familiar streets of Charlottesville, past the university where Marcus and I had met, past the coffee shop where he proposed, past all the landmarks of our relationship, I felt something settling over me like armor. The grief was still there, the heartbreak was still raw, but underneath it all was something harder and more determined. I was done being the good daughter. I was done being the understanding girlfriend. I was done making myself smaller so that other people could feel bigger. Today, at my own wedding, I was going to show everyone, including myself, exactly who Rachel Matthews really was when pushed too far. And if that meant burning down everything I'd built in the process, so be it. Some things needed to burn. St. Matthew's Episcopal Church had never looked more beautiful. As I pulled into the parking lot, I could see the florists making final adjustments to the arrangements I'd spent months choosing. White roses and baby's breath, exactly like I'd always dreamed. The morning sun was streaming through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone steps where I'd imagined taking photos with my new husband. Everything looked perfect for the perfect wedding that was about to become the most spectacular disaster in church history. Jessica practically tackled me as I walked through the side door into the bridal preparation room. She was already in her burgundy maid of honor dress, her dark hair pulled back in the updo we'd practiced 3 times, her makeup flawless despite the early hour. "Rachel Marie Matthews, where the hell have you been?" she demanded, but her tone was more worried than angry. "I've been texting you all morning. The makeup artist has been here for 30 minutes, and your hair appointment was supposed to start 20 minutes ago." Jessica had been my best friend since freshman year at UVA, when we'd been randomly assigned as roommates and discovered we both had an unhealthy obsession with reality TV and Thai food. She'd been there through every relationship disaster, every career crisis, every family drama. She'd held my hair while I threw up after my 21st birthday, and she'd held my hand when my parents got divorced. She'd been the first person I called when Marcus proposed, and she'd cried almost as hard as I did. Looking at her now, so excited and happy for me, so completely unaware that the wedding she'd helped me plan for 18 months was about to implode, I felt a stab of guilt. Jessica didn't deserve to be collateral damage in this war between me, my mother, and Marcus. But she also didn't deserve to watch her best friend marry a cheating bastard while his accomplice looked on proudly. "I'm sorry," I said, forcing a smile. "I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up too late scrolling through my phone. You know how it is." "Bride nerves," said Sarah, my other bridesmaid, appearing from behind a rack of dresses with a steaming cup of coffee. "Totally normal. My sister didn't sleep at all the night before her wedding." Sarah was Marcus's younger sister, which added another layer of complexity to the situation. She genuinely loved me, had welcomed me into their family with open arms, and was probably more excited about this wedding than anyone except maybe Jessica. She'd spent her own money to throw me a surprise bachelorette party in Savannah last month, and she'd been texting me encouragement all week about how lucky she was to get me as a sister-in-law. The guilt twisted deeper, but I pushed it down. Sarah would understand eventually. She'd probably thank me for saving her from having a cheating brother-in-law who'd betrayed his wife before they'd even made it to the altar. "Let's get you gorgeous," Jessica said, steering me toward the makeup chair. "Although honestly, you could walk down that aisle in a potato sack and still be the most beautiful bride in Virginia." The makeup artist, a soft-spoken woman named Linda who'd done at least 50 weddings at St. Matthew's, started working her magic while Jessica and Sarah fluttered around, adjusting flowers and steaming out imaginary wrinkles in my dress. The dress that had cost more than my first car, the dress I'd fallen in love with the moment I saw it, the dress that was supposed to make Marcus's eyes fill with tears when he saw me walking down the aisle toward him. Now, looking at my reflection as Linda applied foundation that would hide the evidence of my sleepless night, I wondered if he'd even be able to look at me without thinking about my mother. "So," Jessica said, settling into the chair next to me, "have you heard from Marcus this morning? Is he nervous?" My hands clenched involuntarily in my lap. "He texted me last night," I said carefully. "He seemed fine. More than fine, actually. He'd seemed like a man who'd just spent the night with his fiancée's mother and was too cowardly to call off the wedding before it was too late." "That's good," Sarah chimed in. "He was pretty quiet at the rehearsal dinner yesterday. I was worried he was getting cold feet." Cold feet. If only it were that simple. "Men just process things differently," Jessica said sagely, as if she hadn't been through 3 broken engagements of her own. "He's probably over at the hotel right now, pacing around and questioning everything, just like you are." Actually, he was probably at the hotel questioning how he was going to look me in the eye when I walked down that aisle, knowing what he'd done. Or maybe he wasn't questioning anything at all. Maybe he was planning to go through with the wedding and continue his affair with my mother as a married man. The thought made my stomach lurch, but it also strengthened my resolve. "Rachel." Linda, the makeup artist, was looking at me with concern. "Are you feeling all right? You went a little pale there." "Just wedding day jitters," I said quickly. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was sitting in a room full of people who loved me, people who were excited to celebrate what they thought was the happiest day of my life, and I was planning to detonate a bomb that would hurt all of them in the process. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "On my way, sweetheart. Can't wait to see you in your dress." The hypocrisy was stunning. She was going to walk into this room and gush over how beautiful I looked in my wedding dress, knowing that she'd spent the night trying to convince my groom not to marry me. Another text, this one from Marcus, getting ready now. See you at the altar. See you at the altar. Like we were just any normal couple on their wedding day, exchanging sweet messages before the ceremony. I stared at both messages and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. They thought they could manipulate me, lie to me, betray me, and still go through the motions of this wedding like nothing had happened. They thought I was naive enough, trusting enough, weak enough to let them get away with it. They were wrong. Your skin looks absolutely radiant, Linda was saying as she worked on my eyes. You're going to photograph beautifully. I was going to photograph beautifully, all right. These photos were going to be in newspapers, on social media, probably on true crime podcasts someday. They were going to be the documentation of the moment when sweet, quiet Rachel Matthews finally said enough. Jessica, I said suddenly, can you do me a favor? Anything, she said immediately. When I walk down that aisle today, no matter what happens, I need you to know that you've been the best friend I could ever ask for. And that whatever happens next isn't your fault. She looked at me strangely. Rachel, you're starting to freak me out a little. What do you mean, whatever happens next? Before I could answer, the door burst open and my mother swept in, looking absolutely stunning in her navy blue mother-of-the-bride dress. She'd had her hair done at an expensive salon in Richmond, her makeup was professionally applied, and she was wearing the pearl necklace my father had given her for their 10th anniversary. Oh my God, Rachel, she exclaimed, rushing over to kiss my cheek carefully so as not to disturb Linda's work. You look absolutely gorgeous. She looked gorgeous too, which was the point. My mother had never met a spotlight she didn't want to steal, and she dressed for this wedding like she was the one getting married. Which, in a way, she was. She was marrying herself to my tragedy, claiming the starring role in the destruction of my happiness. Thanks, Mom, I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. You look beautiful too. And for just a moment, as we smiled at each other in that mirror, I saw us as we used to be. Mother and daughter, getting ready for the biggest day of my life together. The way it was supposed to be. The way it could never be again. I can't believe my baby girl is getting married, she said, and her voice actually broke a little. It feels like yesterday you were playing dress up in my old wedding dress. The same wedding dress from the marriage she'd destroyed. The same marriage she'd taught me was what love looked like, right before she showed me exactly how to tear it apart. Time flies, I agreed, and turned back toward the mirror. In 2 hours, I was going to walk down that aisle. In 2 hours, I was going to stand in front of everyone I'd ever loved and deliver the performance of my lifetime. In 2 hours, everyone in that church was going to learn that Rachel Matthews was nobody's victim. The wedding dress fit like a dream. As Jessica, Sarah, and my mother helped me into the ivory silk gown I'd fallen in love with 18 months ago, I caught sight of myself in the full-length mirror and had to admit that I looked exactly like the bride I'd always imagined I'd be. The sweetheart neckline was perfect, the cathedral train was elegant without being overwhelming, and the delicate beading caught the light in a way that made the whole dress seem to shimmer. I looked beautiful. I looked happy. I looked like a woman who was about to marry the love of her life. The irony was almost too much to bear. Oh, Rachel, my mother breathed, her hands pressed to her chest. You're absolutely stunning. She was crying, actual tears running down her cheeks, carefully applied makeup be damned. And the thing that made it all so much worse was that I could tell they were real tears. She was genuinely moved by seeing me in my wedding dress, genuinely emotional about this moment we'd both dreamed about for years. She just also happened to be sleeping with my fiancé. Don't cry, Mom, I said gently. You'll ruin your makeup. I can't help it, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. You look so much like I did on my wedding day. Same dress silhouette, same glow. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Proud of me. She was proud of me for marrying the man she was having an affair with. Jessica was taking photos with her phone, capturing what she thought were precious mother-daughter moments before the ceremony. These are going to be such beautiful memories, she said, her own eyes misty. Rachel, Your mom has been so amazing through this whole wedding planning process. You're so lucky to have her. Lucky. Right. Sarah was adjusting my train, making sure every fold was perfect. Marcus is going to die when he sees you, she said with a grin. I peeked into the sanctuary a few minutes ago, and he looks so nervous and excited. He keeps fidgeting with his tie. Nervous. He should be nervous. In about an hour, his entire world was going to come crashing down around his ears. How many people are here? I asked, trying to sound like a normal bride concerned about normal things. The church is packed, Sarah reported. I think every seat is filled. Your Aunt Margaret drove down from DC this morning, and Marcus's college roommates all made it. Oh, and Mrs. Peterson from next door is here. You know, the one who taught you piano. Mrs. Peterson. She'd been like a second mother to me growing up, especially after my parents' divorce. She'd been the one to comfort me when my mother started dating other men almost immediately after my father moved out. She'd been the one to listen when I cried about feeling like I wasn't enough to keep my family together. Now she was going to watch me destroy my own wedding in front of 200 people. That's wonderful, I managed. I'm so glad everyone could make it. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. 20 minutes until I get to marry my best friend. I love you, Rachel. My best friend. That was rich, coming from a man who'd spent the night before our wedding in my mother's bed. I stared at the message for a long moment, and Jessica noticed my expression change. Everything okay? She asked. Perfect, I said, slipping my phone back into the small purse Sarah had designated as my emergency bridal kit. Everything is absolutely perfect. The door opened, and Father Williams peered in. He'd been the rector at St. Matthew's for 15 years, had baptized half the children in Charlottesville, and had officiated at least 100 weddings in this very church. He was a kind man with gentle eyes and a voice that made even the most skeptical person believe in the power of love and commitment. Ladies, he said with a warm smile, we're about ready to begin. Rachel, you look absolutely radiant. Thank you, Father Williams. Are you ready for this? He asked, and something in his tone made me look at him more closely. Did he know something? Had he heard rumors? I've been ready my whole life, I said, and it wasn't even a lie. I had been ready my whole life, just not for the wedding I was about to have. Wonderful. I'll see you at the altar in just a few minutes. After he left, my mother took my hands in hers. Her skin was soft and warm, the same hands that had braided my hair every morning before school, the same hands that had held mine during thunderstorms, the same hands that had touched my fiancé just hours ago. Rachel, she said, her voice serious, I need you to know how much I love you. No matter what happens in life, no matter what challenges you face in your marriage, you will always be my daughter and I will always be here for you. The speech was perfect, exactly what a mother should say to her daughter before walking her down the aisle. It would have been beautiful if it weren't coming from a woman who'd spent the past several months systematically betraying everything she claimed to stand for. I know, Mom, I said. I love you too. And the terrible thing was, it was still true. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies and the unforgivable cruelty of what she'd done, I still loved her. That's what made it all so much worse. Okay, ladies, Jessica said, checking her watch, it's showtime. Rachel, are you ready to become Mrs. Marcus Thompson? Mrs. Marcus Thompson. The name I'd practiced writing in my journal, the name I'd been looking forward to taking, the name that now made me feel sick to my stomach. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded, I think I'm ready to become exactly who I'm supposed to be. The processional music started, the familiar strains of Pachelbel's canon drifting through the walls from the sanctuary. Sarah and Jessica lined up at the door, bouquets in hand, ready to walk down the aisle ahead of me. My mother offered me her arm. Since my father couldn't be here, since he was living in Florida with his new wife, trying to forget the disaster of his first marriage, she was the one who would escort me down the aisle. She was the one who would hand me over to Marcus, completing the circle of betrayal in front of everyone we knew. Ready, sweetheart? She asked. I looked at her one more time, memorizing her face in this moment before everything changed forever. She looked so proud, so happy, so completely unaware that her daughter had discovered her secret. "I'm ready," I said. And I was. I was ready to walk down that aisle. I was ready to stand at the altar in front of Marcus and Father Williams and 200 wedding guests. I was ready to answer the question that would change everything. I was ready to show everyone in that church exactly what happened when you betrayed Rachel Matthews. The doors to the sanctuary opened, and I could see the aisle stretching out before me, lined with white rose petals and filled with the faces of everyone I'd ever loved. At the end of that aisle stood Marcus in his black tuxedo, looking nervous and handsome and completely unsuspecting. Behind him, I could see the stained glass windows casting colored light across the altar, the same light that had blessed hundreds of couples before us, the same light that was about to witness something that would be talked about in Charlottesville for years to come. I took a deep breath, adjusted my grip on my bouquet, and stepped forward into whatever came next. The wedding march began, and every single person in that church stood up and turned to watch me walk toward my future. They had no idea they were about to witness history. Every step down that aisle felt like walking through quicksand. The church was absolutely packed, just like Sarah had said. 200 faces turned toward me, all of them smiling, all of them filled with joy and excitement for what they thought was going to be a beautiful celebration of love. Mrs. Peterson was there in the third row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My college roommates were clustered together on the left side, holding up their phones to capture every moment. Marcus's fraternity brothers were in the back, probably already planning their speeches for the reception. Everyone I'd ever loved was in this room, gathered to witness what they believed would be the happiest day of my life. The organ music swelled, and I felt my mother's arm tighten slightly around mine. She was nervous too, I realized. But not for the reasons she should have been. "Smile, sweetheart," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "This is your moment." My moment. She was right about that, just not in the way she meant. 3 more steps, and I could see Marcus clearly at the altar. He looked exactly like the man I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that never quite stayed in place and brown eyes that used to make me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He was wearing the tuxedo we'd picked out together, the one that had cost more than my first month's rent but that I'd insisted on because it made him look like a movie star. He looked nervous, just like Sarah had said. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, and I could see him swallowing hard as he watched me approach. For a split second, I wondered if he was going to confess, if he was going to stop the ceremony and admit what he'd done before I had to do it for him. But no. He just stood there, waiting for me to reach him so we could begin the charade of our wedding vows. 2 more steps. Father Williams was smiling at me with that gentle, encouraging expression he'd perfected over decades of wedding ceremonies. He had no idea that he was about to preside over the most memorable service of his career. 1 more step, and I was there. My mother released my arm and took her place in the front pew, right next to Marcus's parents. She looked beautiful and proud and completely at peace with herself, like a woman who hadn't spent the previous night betraying her own daughter. Marcus stepped forward to take my hand, and for a moment we were close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same cologne I'd bought him for Christmas, the same cologne I'd smelled on my mother's robe that morning. "You look incredible," he whispered, his voice rough with what I might have mistaken for emotion if I didn't know better. "Thank you," I whispered back, my voice steady despite the hurricane of rage and heartbreak spinning inside my chest. Father Williams gestured for everyone to be seated, and the sanctuary filled with the soft rustle of 200 people settling into wooden pews. The morning light was still streaming through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the altar where Marcus and I stood holding hands like the picture-perfect couple everyone believed us to be. "Dearly beloved," Father Williams began, his voice carrying easily through the church, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God and in the presence of these witnesses to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Holy matrimony. The words that were supposed to represent something sacred, something pure, something built on trust and honesty and mutual respect. The words that were being spoken over a union that was already corrupted by lies and betrayal. "Marriage is an honorable estate," Father Williams continued, "instituted by God, signifying the mystical union between Christ and his church. It is therefore not to be entered into unadvisedly or lightly, but reverently, discreetly, and in the fear of God. Reverently, discreetly, in the fear of God. I almost laughed at the irony. There had been nothing reverent about what Marcus and my mother had done. Nothing discreet about their affair, at least not from where I was standing. And if they feared God, they clearly feared their own desires more. Into this holy estate, Father Williams went on, these two persons present come now to be joined. If any person can show just cause why they may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional pause. In every wedding I'd ever attended, this was a moment when everyone held their breath for a few seconds, half expecting someone to object but knowing no one ever would. It was ceremonial, a relic from older times when marriages were more about politics and property than love. But as Father Williams spoke those words, I felt something shift inside me. Because I could show just cause. I had more just cause than anyone in the history of weddings. I had evidence of infidelity, of betrayal, of a groom who had broken his vows before he'd even made them. The silence stretched on for the traditional few seconds, and I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on us. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone was waiting for Father Williams to continue with the ceremony, to move on to the part where Marcus and I would exchange rings and promises and become husband and wife. Everyone except me. The question before us now, Father Williams said, moving into the next phase of the ceremony, is whether Marcus and Rachel are prepared to make these vows to each other. Marcus, will you have this woman to be your wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her, in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep yourself only unto her, so long as you both shall live? Forsaking all others. Keep yourself only unto her. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes as he answered, his voice strong and clear and absolutely convincing. I will. The lie came so easily to him that I almost admired his acting ability. Here he was, standing in front of God and our families and friends, promising to forsake all others when he'd spent the previous night in my mother's bed. Here he was, promising to keep himself only unto me when he'd already proven he was incapable of doing that even before our marriage began. Rachel, Father Williams turned to me. Will you have this man to be your wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Will you love him, comfort him, honor and obey him, in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep yourself only unto him, so long as you both shall live? This was it. This was the moment I'd been planning for since I'd heard their voices through my bedroom floor. This was when sweet, naive Rachel Matthews was supposed to say I will and seal her fate as the wife of a cheating bastard and the daughter of a betraying mother. This was when I was supposed to let them win. I looked into Marcus's eyes, those brown eyes that had once made me feel so safe and loved and cherished. I thought about all the plans we'd made together, all the dreams we'd shared, all the times he'd told me I was the only woman he'd ever want to marry. I thought about the engagement ring on my finger that he'd chosen so carefully, the honeymoon to Italy we'd planned for next week, the house we'd put an offer on just last month. I thought about my mother sitting in the front row, probably holding her breath, probably praying that I'd just say the words and make this whole charade official so she could go back to sneaking around with my husband behind my back. I thought about all the people in this church who loved me, who wanted me to be happy, who had no idea they were witnessing the destruction of everything I'd built my adult life around. And then I thought about who I wanted to be when I walked out of this church. Did I want to be the woman who let herself be betrayed and humiliated and lied to? Did I want to be the woman who said I will to a man who had already proven he wouldn't? Did I want to be the daughter who protected her mother's reputation at the cost of her own self-respect? Or did I want to be the woman who stood up for herself when no one else would? The silence was stretching on too long. Father Williams was looking at me with gentle concern, probably thinking I was just overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. Marcus was starting to look nervous, his grip on my hand getting tighter. I could hear someone cough in the congregation, could feel the weight of all those expectant faces waiting for me to complete this ritual they'd all witnessed dozens of times before. But I wasn't going to complete it. Not the way they expected. I took a deep breath, looked directly into Marcus's eyes, and spoke in a voice that carried clearly through every corner of that church. I have something to say first. The silence in that church was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor as 200 people tried to process what I'd just said. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't how weddings were supposed to go. The bride was supposed to say, "I will," and then everyone would cry happy tears and throw rice and celebrate love conquering all. The bride was not supposed to say she had something to say first. Father Williams looked genuinely confused, his practiced wedding ceremony smile faltering for the first time in probably 15 years. "Rachel," he said gently, "perhaps we could." "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I need to say this now. Before we go any further." Marcus's hand was gripping mine so tightly it hurt, and when I looked at his face, I could see panic beginning to set in. His face had gone pale, and there was something in his eyes that looked like the beginning of understanding. He knew. Somehow, he knew that I knew. "Rachel," he whispered urgently, "please. Not here. Not like this." But it was going to be here, and it was going to be like this, because this was the moment I'd been planning for. This was the moment when I stopped being a victim and started being something else entirely. I turned away from Marcus and faced the congregation. 200 faces stared back at me, ranging from confused to concerned to completely bewildered. Jessica was in the front row with the other bridesmaids, her mouth slightly open, her bouquet forgotten in her lap. Sarah looked like she was trying to figure out if this was some kind of surprise I'd planned, some non-traditional element I'd decided to add to the ceremony. My mother was sitting directly in front of me, and the expression on her face was pure terror. She knew exactly what was coming. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," I began, my voice carrying easily through the church. "When Marcus and I started planning this wedding 18 months ago, I thought this would be the happiest day of my life. I thought I was marrying my best friend, my soulmate, the man who would love and honor me for the rest of our lives." A few people nodded, probably thinking this was some kind of heartfelt speech before the vows. Mrs. Peterson smiled at me encouragingly from the third row. "I thought I was surrounded by people who loved me," I continued, "people who wanted what was best for me, people I could trust with my heart and my future." Marcus's grip on my hand was getting painful now. "Rachel, stop," he hissed under his breath. "Please. We can talk about this later." But I wasn't stopping. I'd been quiet for too long, been understanding for too long, been the good daughter and the supportive girlfriend for too long. Today, in front of everyone I'd ever loved, I was finally going to use my voice. "Unfortunately," I said, and my voice got stronger with every word, "I discovered last night that I was wrong about both of those things." The church was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning system humming. A few people were starting to shift uncomfortably in their pews, sensing that something was very wrong but not yet understanding what it was. "You see," I continued, turning slightly so I could see both Marcus and my mother, "last night, I heard my fiancé tell my mother that he should have called off this engagement months ago." Gasps echoed through the church. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. In the back, I could see Marcus's fraternity brothers exchanging confused glances. I heard him say that I deserved better than what he was giving me. I went on, my voice getting louder, more confident. "And do you know what? He was absolutely right about that. Rachel." My mother's voice was sharp, desperate. She was half standing in her pew, her face white with horror. "Rachel, please sit down. You're not thinking clearly." "Actually, Mom," I said, turning to look directly at her, "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Because last night, I also heard you tell my fiancé that after today, after we were married, you two would figure out how to handle this. I heard you beg him to stay in your bed just one more night before he became my husband." The church erupted. People were gasping, murmuring, turning to look at each other in shock and disbelief. I could hear someone whisper, "Oh my God," and someone else say, "Did she just say what I think she said?" My mother looked like she was going to be sick. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, and now my voice was carrying over the murmurs of the congregation, clear and strong and unstoppable. I understand that my mother has been sleeping with my fiancé. I understand that they've been lying to me, betraying me, and planning to continue their affair even after Marcus and I were married. The church was in chaos now. People were standing up, trying to get a better look, trying to process what they were hearing. I could see Father Williams making helpless gestures, clearly having no idea how to handle a situation that definitely wasn't covered in seminary school. Marcus had let go of my hand and was backing away from me like I was dangerous. Maybe I was dangerous. Maybe that was exactly what I needed to be. So when Father Williams asked me if I would take Marcus as my husband, I continued, raising my voice to be heard over the commotion. If I would love him and honor him and keep myself only unto him, I realized I had to give an honest answer. I paused, looking out at all those faces, all those people who had come here expecting to celebrate love and had instead witnessed the most spectacular wedding disaster in Virginia history. The honest answer, I said, is that I will not marry a man who has already broken his vows before he made them. I will not promise to honor a man who has dishonored me in the worst possible way. And I will not start my marriage with a lie, even if everyone else here is comfortable living with lies. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silence. This wasn't anticipation or confusion. This was a silence of 200 people trying to process the complete implosion of what was supposed to be a joyful celebration. Rachel, Marcus finally found his voice, and he sounded desperate. Please. Let's talk about this privately. Don't do this here. Don't destroy everything we've built. I almost laughed at that. Everything we've built? Marcus, you destroyed everything we built when you decided to sleep with my mother. You destroyed it when you looked me in the eye every day for months and lied about where you were and who you were with. You destroyed it when you let me plan this wedding, let me send out invitations, let me dream about our future together, all while you were betraying me in the worst possible way. I turned back to the congregation, many of whom were openly staring now, their phones out, probably recording every word. This was going to be on social media within the hour. This was going to be the story people told for years. Good. Let them tell it. Let them remember what happened when someone tried to make Rachel Matthews a fool. So no, I said, my voice ringing through the church with absolute finality, I will not take this man as my husband. I will not promise to love and honor someone who is incapable of loving and honoring me back. I looked directly at my mother, who was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, her carefully constructed facade finally crumbling. And I will not forgive the people who betrayed me just to make everyone else more comfortable. Then I did something I'd been dreaming about since 2 o'clock that morning. I pulled off my engagement ring, the ring that had cost Marcus 3 months' salary, the ring I'd been so proud to wear, the ring that now felt like a symbol of everything false and hollow in my life. And I threw it at his feet. The sound of the diamond hitting the marble floor echoed through the silent church like a gunshot. I'm sorry, everyone, I said, gathering up my train with as much dignity as I could muster, but there's not going to be a wedding today. Walking back down that aisle was the longest and shortest journey of my life. Every step away from the altar felt like shedding a layer of the person I used to be, the person who trusted blindly, who made excuses for other people's behavior, who put everyone else's comfort ahead of her own truth. By the time I reached the back of the church, I wasn't the same woman who had walked down that aisle 20 minutes earlier in a white dress full of dreams and expectations. The congregation was in complete chaos behind me. I could hear voices rising, people asking each other if they'd really just witnessed what they thought they'd witnessed. I could hear my mother calling my name, her voice desperate and broken. I could hear Marcus saying something, probably trying to do damage control, probably trying to convince people that I was having some kind of breakdown. Let him try. Everyone in that church had heard exactly what I'd said, and there was no putting that genie back in the bottle. Jessica caught up with me just as I reached the double doors that led to the vestibule. She was running in her bridesmaid heels, her carefully styled hair coming loose, her face a mixture of shock and concern and something that might have been admiration. Rachel, she said, grabbing my arm. Rachel, wait. Are you okay? What the hell just happened in there? I turned to look at her, this woman who had been my best friend for over a decade, who had supported me through everything, who deserved better than being collateral damage in my family's dysfunction. I'm more okay than I've been in months, I said, and I meant it. Despite the chaos, despite the hurt, despite the fact that I'd just blown up my entire life in front of 200 people, I felt clearer and stronger than I had since the night Marcus proposed. But Marcus, and your mom. Jessica was struggling to find words, which was unusual for her. Is it true? Did they really? Every word, I said. I heard them together last night. I have the text message where he said he couldn't go through with the wedding. I have everything, Jess. Her face went through about 6 different emotions in the span of 10 seconds. Shock, anger, disgust, sympathy, and finally, something that looked like fierce protectiveness. That bastard, she said. That absolute bastard. And your mother. Jesus Christ, Rachel, I can't even imagine. The church doors opened behind us, and Sarah came rushing out, still looking completely bewildered. Rachel, what's going on? I don't understand what just happened in there. This was the hardest part. Sarah was Marcus's sister, but she was also someone I genuinely cared about. She was going to be caught in the middle of this mess, and it wasn't her fault. Sarah, I said gently, your brother has been having an affair with my mother. I found out last night, and I couldn't go through with the wedding knowing what I knew. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched her face change as the implications hit her. An affair. With your... But that's... She trailed off, shaking her head. No, Marcus wouldn't do that. There has to be some mistake. There's no mistake, I said. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, and I know it puts you in an impossible position. But I couldn't marry him, and I couldn't pretend everything was fine. Before she could respond, the church doors burst open again, and Marcus came rushing out. He'd loosened his tie and his hair was disheveled, and he looked like a man whose entire world had just collapsed, which, I supposed, it had. Rachel, he called out, looking around wildly until he spotted us. Rachel, please. We need to talk. No, I said simply. We really don't. You don't understand, he said, approaching us with his hands held out like he was trying to calm down a dangerous animal. It's not what you think. It's complicated, and if you just let me explain. Explain what? I asked, and my voice was deadly calm. Explain how you've been sleeping with my mother? Explain how you lied to my face every single day? Explain how you were planning to marry me while continuing your affair. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said desperately. It got out of hand. It didn't mean anything, Rachel. You have to believe me. Jessica made a sound of disgust. It didn't mean anything? Are you kidding me right now? You were going to marry her anyway, Sarah said, and her voice was small and confused. If it didn't mean anything, why were you going to go through with the wedding? Marcus looked back and forth between all of us, clearly realizing that there was no version of this conversation that was going to end well for him. Because I love Rachel, he said finally. I do love you, Rachel. More than anything. What happened with your mother? It was a mistake. A huge mistake, but it's over now. It's over because I ended it, I said. Not because you came to your senses, not because you felt guilty, not because you decided to do the right thing. It's over because I found out and refused to be a part of your lie anymore. The church doors opened again, and more people started spilling out. Some were guests who were trying to figure out what to do now that there wasn't going to be a reception to go to. Others were clearly just curious, wanting to get a closer look at the drama that had just unfolded. And then my mother appeared. She looked absolutely destroyed. Her makeup was completely ruined from crying, her hair was falling out of its careful style, and her navy blue dress was wrinkled from clutching at it in distress. She looked every single one of her 53 years, and for the first time in my life, she looked smaller than me. Rachel, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel, please. Can we talk? Just the two of us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the mother I'd grown up loving and admiring. The woman who had taught me how to braid friendship bracelets and how to drive a stick shift. The woman who had held me when I cried over my first heartbreak and celebrated with me when I got my first job. She was still in there somewhere, but she was buried under layers of selfishness and betrayal and choices that I couldn't understand or forgive. "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," I said. "You made your choice. You chose him over me. You chose your own desires over your daughter's happiness. You chose to betray me in the worst possible way, and then you were going to stand there and watch me marry him without saying a word." "It wasn't like that," she said, reaching toward me. "You don't understand the whole situation. If you just let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked, echoing my earlier question to Marcus. "Explain how you justified sleeping with my fiancé? Explain how you convinced yourself that this was okay? Explain how you plan to look me in the eye every Christmas and birthday and anniversary for the rest of my life, knowing what you'd done?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me the truth. I thought she might admit what she'd done and why she'd done it and how she'd convinced herself it was acceptable. Instead, she did what she'd always done when confronted with her own behavior. She made it about her. "You're my daughter," she said, and now she was crying again. "I gave birth to you. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. Doesn't that count for something? Doesn't our relationship mean more to you than some man?" Some man. She was calling Marcus some man when he was the man I'd been planning to spend my life with, the man she'd been sleeping with for God knows how long. "Our relationship stopped meaning something to me the moment you decided to betray it," I said. "And he's not just some man, Mom. He's the man you chose over your own daughter." I could see more people gathering in the vestibule now, pretending to have conversations but really just trying to eavesdrop on the most scandalous family drama Charlottesville had seen in decades. "Fine. Let them listen. Let them hear every word." "I'm leaving now," I announced to the small group that had gathered around us. "Jessica, Sarah, thank you for being here today. Thank you for caring about me enough to be part of what I thought was going to be the happiest day of my life." I looked at Marcus one more time, taking in the face that I'd once loved so much, trying to memorize it so I'd remember exactly what betrayal looked like. "I hope it was worth it," I said to him. "I hope whatever you found with my mother was worth destroying 3 years of our relationship and any chance you might have had at real happiness." Then I looked at my mother, the woman who had given me life and then tried to destroy it. "And I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope when you're with him, you remember that you chose this. You chose him over me. You chose your own selfish desires over your daughter's future. I hope that choice brings you everything you deserve." And with that, I walked out of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, leaving behind my wedding, my fiancé, my mother, and every single plan I'd made for my future. I had no idea what came next, but I knew it had to be better than what I was leaving behind. The first thing I did after leaving the church was drive to the nearest Target and buy a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. I couldn't spend another minute in that wedding dress, the dress that had cost more than some people's cars, the dress I'd dreamed about wearing since I was a little girl, the dress that now felt like a costume from a play I no longer wanted to be in. In the Target bathroom, I struggled out of the ivory silk and beading, leaving it in a crumpled heap on the floor while I pulled on clothes that actually felt like me. The woman who looked back at me in the fluorescent-lit mirror was different from the bride who had walked down the aisle 2 hours ago. Her hair was falling out of its elaborate updo, her makeup was smeared, but her eyes were clear and focused in a way they hadn't been in months. I looked like someone who had finally told the truth. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I'd left the church. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails from numbers I recognized and numbers I didn't. The story was already spreading, just like I'd known it would. In a town like Charlottesville, where everyone knew everyone else's business, the tale of the bride who exposed her mother's affair at her own wedding was going to be legendary. I scrolled through some of the messages as I sat in my car in the Target parking lot, still trying to process everything that had happened. "Jessica, where did you go? Are you okay? Call me back right now. My Aunt Margaret, Rachel, honey, I don't know what happened in that church, but I want you to know I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Call me when you're ready. Mrs. Peterson, my dear girl, you are braver than you know. Come by for tea whenever you need to talk. And then there were the messages from numbers I didn't recognize, probably people who had been at the wedding and gotten my information from mutual friends. Girl, you are my hero. What you did today took serious courage. I was at your wedding and I just wanted to say I've never seen anything braver in my life. Your story is already all over Facebook. You're going to inspire so many women to stand up for themselves. But it was the message from my father that made me cry for the first time since this whole nightmare had started. Rachel, I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for having the strength to walk away. You deserve so much better than what they gave you. I love you, and I'm here if you need anything at all. My father, who lived 800 miles away with his new wife, who had been devastated when I told him my mother would be walking me down the aisle instead of him, who had been hurt by that choice but had accepted it gracefully because he wanted what was best for me. My father, who had been betrayed by my mother 17 years ago in a different way but just as painfully. I called him back immediately. Dad! I said when he answered, and my voice broke on the word. Oh, sweetheart, he said, and I could hear the pain in his voice. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I didn't know what else to do, I said, and now the tears were coming fast and hard. I couldn't marry him, Dad. I couldn't stand there and promise to love and honor someone who had been lying to me for God knows how long. You did exactly the right thing, he said firmly. It took incredible courage to do what you did today. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you saved yourself from years of heartbreak and betrayal. Everyone's going to talk about this forever, I said. Every time someone sees me, they're going to remember the girl who called off her wedding at the altar. Let them talk, he said. The people who matter will understand that you're a woman with integrity who refused to settle for less than she deserved. And the people who don't understand that aren't worth worrying about. We talked for another 20 minutes, and by the time I hung up, I felt steadier than I had all day. My father was right. I had done the right thing, even if it was the hard thing, even if it meant facing consequences I couldn't yet imagine. My phone rang again, and this time it was Jessica. Where the hell are you? She demanded as soon as I answered. I've been looking for you for 2 hours. I'm at Target, I said. Target? Why are you at Target? I needed real clothes, I said. I couldn't be in that dress anymore. There was a pause, and then Jessica's voice got softer. Okay. That makes sense. Are you okay? I mean, obviously you're not okay, but are you safe? Do you need me to come get you? I'm safe, I said. I'm just trying to figure out what happens now. What happens now is that you go home, you take a hot shower, you order pizza, and you let me come over and help you burn every picture of Marcus that exists in your apartment. Despite everything, I almost smiled. That sounds like a good start. And Rachel. Jessica's voice was serious now. I want you to know that what you did today was incredible. I've been your best friend for 10 years, and I've watched you make yourself smaller for other people your entire adult life. Today, you finally took up the space you deserved. I've never been prouder of you. After I hung up with Jessica, I sat in that Target parking lot for another hour, just thinking. About the life I'd been planning with Marcus, about the relationship I'd had with my mother, about the person I'd been and the person I was becoming. The truth was, there had been signs. Little things that I'd ignored or explained away because I'd wanted so desperately to believe in the fairy tale I'd built in my head. Marcus working late more often than usual. My mother asking detailed questions about his schedule. The way they'd both seemed nervous at family dinners lately, like they were sharing a secret I wasn't privy to. I'd noticed, but I hadn't wanted to see. I'd been so invested in my vision of my perfect life that I'd ignored the evidence that it was all built on lies. But I wasn't ignoring it anymore. I wasn't making excuses anymore. I wasn't protecting other people's feelings at the expense of my own truth anymore. I was done being the woman who made herself smaller so other people could feel bigger. I was done being the daughter who protected her mother's reputation at the cost of her own self-respect. I was done being the girlfriend who overlooked red flags because she was afraid of being alone. I was 29 years old, I was single for the first time in 3 years, and I had absolutely no idea what came next. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I was excited to find out. As I drove home to my apartment, the apartment I'd been planning to move out of next week, the apartment I'd already given notice on because Marcus and I were supposed to move into our new house together, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel after the day I'd had. I felt free. The wedding dress was still crumpled on the floor of the Target bathroom, probably being discovered by some confused employee who would spend the rest of their shift wondering what kind of story could explain a $3,000 wedding gown abandoned in a retail restroom. Let them wonder. Let everyone wonder. Let the story become legend. Let it be told and retold and embellished until it was more myth than memory. I was ready to become the woman who lived through it, learned from it, and came out stronger on the other side. I was ready to become the woman who refused to settle for less than she deserved, even if it meant starting over from scratch. I was ready to become the woman I should have been all along. 6 months later, I was living in Richmond, working at a non-profit that helped women escape domestic violence, and I hadn't spoken to my mother since the day I walked out of that church. The transition hadn't been easy. In the weeks following what the local newspaper had dubbed the wedding heard round Charlottesville, I'd had to deal with cancelled vendors, returned gifts, and a level of public attention I'd never experienced before. The story had spread beyond our small college town, picked up by social media and local news stations across Virginia. For a brief, surreal moment, I was famous for being the woman who'd exposed her mother's affair at her own wedding. But the attention died down, as attention always does, and I was left to figure out how to rebuild a life I'd never expected to have to rebuild. The hardest part wasn't the logistics, cancelling the honeymoon, breaking the lease on the house Marcus and I were supposed to share, finding a new place to live. The hardest part was learning how to trust my own judgment again. 4 months after the wedding, I questioned every decision I made, every relationship I had, every instinct I felt. If I could be so wrong about the 2 people I'd trusted most in the world, how could I trust myself about anything? It took therapy, lots of therapy, to understand that being betrayed doesn't make you naive or stupid or weak. It makes you human. And it took even more therapy to understand that my mother's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth as a daughter, just as Marcus's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth as a woman. Some people aren't capable of the kind of love and loyalty you give them. That's not your failure. That's theirs. Jessica had been my lifeline during those first few months. She'd helped me pack up my old life, driven with me to Richmond to look at apartments, and been there for every breakdown, every angry rant, every moment when I'd questioned whether I'd made the right choice. You know, she'd said one night when we were sitting in my new apartment, eating take-out Chinese food off paper plates because I hadn't bought real dishes yet, I keep waiting for you to regret what you did. But you seem, I don't know, happier than you've been in years. She was right. Despite the pain, despite the upheaval, despite the loneliness that sometimes hit me like a physical blow, I was happier. I was more myself than I'd been in years, maybe ever. Working at the women's shelter had been Jessica's idea. You understand what it's like to be betrayed by people who are supposed to protect you, she'd said. Maybe you could help other women who've been through similar things. She'd been right about that too. There was something powerful about using my own experience to help other women find their voices, their strength, their way out of situations that had seemed impossible to escape. And if you've ever felt trapped by other people's expectations, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, you know exactly how important that kind of work can be. I thought about this as I sat in my office on a Friday afternoon in October, 6 months and 2 weeks after what should have been my wedding day. I was reviewing case files for the women in our program when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Rachel Matthews, I answered. Rachel? It's Sarah. Sarah. Marcus's sister. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding, though Jessica had told me she'd tried to call a few times in the weeks afterward. I'd never called her back, partly because I hadn't known what to say, and partly because I'd assumed she'd chosen her brother's side in the wreckage of our relationships. Hi, Sarah, I said carefully. How are you? I'm good. I'm okay. I've been wanting to call you for months, but I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. It's fine, I said, though I wasn't sure it was. What's going on? There was a long pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller. More uncertain than I'd ever heard her sound. I wanted you to know that Marcus and I aren't really speaking anymore, she said. After what happened at your wedding, after I found out what he'd done, I couldn't pretend it was okay. I couldn't act like my brother was the victim in all of this. That surprised me. Sarah had always been close to Marcus, had always looked up to him as her big brother who could do no wrong. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I know that must have been hard for you. It was the right thing to do, she said firmly. What he did to you was unforgivable. And what your mother did. God, Rachel, I can't even imagine how you survived that. We talked for a few more minutes, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared history. She told me that Marcus had moved to Atlanta for a new job, that he'd seemed miserable the last time she'd seen him. She told me that her parents still asked about me, that they'd been horrified when they learned the truth about why the wedding had fallen apart. But it was what she said at the end of the call that stayed with me long after we hung up. Rachel, she said, I want you to know that what you did that day in the church was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. I keep thinking about it, about how you had the strength to walk away from everything you'd planned, everything you thought you wanted, because you refused to build your life on a lie. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was thick with emotion. I've been in a relationship for 2 years with someone who doesn't treat me the way I deserve to be treated. And every time I think about leaving, every time I think about standing up for myself, I remember you in that church, throwing your engagement ring at Marcus's feet and walking away with your head held high. And I think, if Rachel could do that, maybe I can too. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the ripple effects of that day in June. I'd thought I was just saving myself from a marriage built on betrayal, but maybe I'd done something bigger than that. Maybe I'd given other people permission to expect better for themselves too. The sun was setting over Richmond, painting my office walls gold, when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Drinks tonight? I have news. We met at a wine bar downtown, and Jessica was practically vibrating with excitement when I arrived. Okay, she said before I'd even sat down. You're not going to believe this. Try me, I said, settling into my chair and accepting the glass of wine she'd already ordered for me. I ran into Mrs. Peterson at the grocery store today, she said, and she told me that your mother and Marcus broke up. I felt something twist in my chest, not pain, exactly, but something more complicated. When? About a month ago, apparently. Mrs. Peterson said she heard it from your neighbor, who heard it from someone else, so you know how reliable the Charlottesville gossip network is. But supposedly, your mother ended it. She ended it. That surprised me. I'd assumed that if their relationship fell apart, it would be because Marcus couldn't handle the guilt or the social consequences. That's what Mrs. Peterson heard. And get this, apparently your mother has been telling people that she made a terrible mistake, that she regrets what happened more than anything she's ever done in her life. I took a sip of wine, trying to process this information. And Marcus. Word is he's miserable. Lost weight, looks terrible, spends most of his time alone. Sarah wasn't exaggerating when she said he seemed miserable. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice had been served, like the universe had finally punished the people who had hurt me so badly. Instead, I felt something closer to sadness. You know what the weirdest part is? I said to Jessica. I don't hate them anymore. She looked surprised. Really? Really? I mean, what they did was awful, and it changed my life forever. But hating them, it was like carrying around poison and hoping they'd be the ones to get sick. At some point, I had to put it down. Jessica raised her glass. To putting it down, she said. To putting it down, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the other patrons of the wine bar live their lives, pursue their own relationships, make their own choices. "Can I tell you something?" Jessica said eventually. "Always. I used to worry about you, before all this happened. I worried that you were settling, that you were so focused on having the life you thought you were supposed to want that you weren't paying attention to whether it was the life you actually wanted." I looked at her curiously. "You never said anything." "Because it wasn't my place. And because I thought maybe I was wrong, maybe you really were as happy as you seemed." She paused, swirling the wine in her glass. "But watching you these past 6 months, you're different, Rachel. You're stronger, more confident, more yourself. It's like that day in the church didn't just end your relationship with Marcus and your mother. It ended your relationship with the version of yourself that was willing to accept less than she deserved." She was right. The woman who had walked down that aisle in June had been willing to overlook red flags, to make excuses for other people's behavior, to prioritize keeping the peace over speaking her truth. The woman sitting in this wine bar in October wouldn't make those same compromises. "I have something to tell you too," I said. "I've been thinking about going back to school." "For what?" "Law school. I want to specialize in family law, maybe work with women going through divorces, custody battles, domestic violence situations." I paused, feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. I want to help other women find their voices the way I finally found mine. Jessica's face lit up. "Rachel, that's amazing. That's perfect for you. It'll mean a few more years of school, a lot of debt, starting over again professionally." "So what?" she said. "You're 29 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you, and for the first time in years, you get to choose exactly what that life looks like. That's not a burden, that's a gift." A gift. I'd never thought of it that way before, but she was right. The destruction of my old life had given me something precious, the freedom to build a new one based on who I really was, not who I thought I was supposed to be. We talked until the wine bar closed, making plans and dreaming about futures that 6 months ago I couldn't have imagined. When we finally said goodbye on the sidewalk outside, Jessica hugged me tighter than usual. "I'm proud of you," she said. "For everything. For what you did in that church, for how you've rebuilt your life, for who you're becoming." As I drove home to my small apartment, I thought about that morning 6 months ago when I'd woken up thinking it was going to be the best day of my life. In a way, maybe it had been, just not for the reasons I'd expected. That morning, I'd been a woman who was willing to marry a man who had betrayed her rather than face the difficult truth of her situation. I'd been a daughter who would have protected her mother's reputation at the cost of her own happiness. Tonight, I was a woman who had learned to trust her own instincts, to speak her own truth, to demand the love and respect she deserved. That wedding day had ended one version of my story, but it had started a better one. And as I pulled into my parking spot and looked up at the windows of my apartment, my space, my sanctuary, my new beginning, I realized something that would have surprised the bride who had stood at that altar 6 months ago. I was grateful. Grateful for the betrayal that had shown me who people really were. Grateful for the heartbreak that had taught me I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Grateful for the courage I'd found to walk away from everything I'd planned in favor of everything I deserved. If you're going through something similar right now, if someone you trusted has betrayed you, if you're facing a choice between the comfortable lie and the difficult truth, I want you to know this: you're braver than you think you are. You're stronger than you know. And you deserve so much better than settling for less than you're worth. It might not feel like it in the moment, but sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can also be the best thing that happens to you. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you actually need. Sometimes you have to walk away from the life you planned to walk into the life you deserve. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the person you become after everything falls apart is exactly the person you were always meant to be. 6 months after my wedding day disaster, I finally understood what real love looks like, and it starts with loving yourself enough to demand better. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength or inspired you to make a change in your own life, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about finding your voice and claiming your power. And let me know in the comments, Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and speaking your truth? How did you find the courage to do what was right for you? Because at the end of the day, that's what this story is really about. Not revenge, not drama, not spectacular wedding disasters, though those make for good storytelling. It's about the moment when you realize you deserve better, and you finally have the courage to do something about it. It's about learning that your voice matters more than their comfort. It's about discovering that the person you become when you stop accepting less than you deserve is the person you were always meant to be. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone in this journey of becoming who we're meant to be. And remember, you're braver than you think, stronger than you know, and worthy of so much more than settling. Never forget that.